Welcome to this new full demonstration of editing a landscape photo. I'm going to use this Dodger Stadium photo, and I think we can have a lot of fun with it. So I'm going to walk through the entire process starting with cropping. So for a lot of landscape photos, I like picking a wider aspect ratio. Clicking the crop, it tries to do it automatically. I'm going to choose First, I'm going to see 16 by 9, which is a great sort of aspect ratio because it's good for mobile devices. It's the standard size for your phone screen, for your television, for your computer screen. So for a backdrop, this would be perfect. The first thing that I notice when I do this, and I kind of brought it down to the bottom because I don't want too much to be cropped out. I mean, that's just a little bit extreme. One of the first things I notice is this antenna or this tower on the left-hand side. I don't want that in my photo, so I'm going to crop in just a little bit. Because this photo is so large, I don't have to worry about zooming in or cropping in too much. It's a 42 megapixel or 43 megapixel file, I think. And then I just want to make sure that the rotation looks good. And when you do the rotation, I like it because it brings up this grid that helps you sort of make the horizon perfectly horizontal. I also am looking at the lines in the Dodger Stadium seats to make sure those are kind of lined up as well. Something like that looks pretty good. You can always make changes later. So let's go back to our adjustment and starting with our exposure. So first, I'm going to actually just see what the overall light exposure looks like, what photos will do. Obviously, it's a fairly dark photo. The darks are a bit too dark, but the sky wasn't too dark before. I kind of liked how it was. So I might bring this up and use that as a starting point and then go in and make my next adjustments. So I might bring the overall brightness down just a little bit, bring my shadows up for sure so that I can see those. The highlights I'm going to bring down though because I want to bring back some of that color and that information in the sky. If you make things too overexposed or too underexposed, you're basically just losing information. This brilliance, I just want to see what this was doing. And actually that is helping quite a bit, but maybe too much. I don't want to necessarily make this look like it was shot during the middle of a sunny day. It was shot in the morning during sunrise, and so it's okay if it's a little bit dark and subdued. That's not the point of editing. You're not trying to make everything look like it was shot with the sun blaring down on it. So it's okay to be a little bit dark. Let me just play with this overall exposure. I like that, but then to combat that, I might bring the contrast down and maybe the highlights down even more. I can play with the levels or the curves as well to make some more adjustments to the exposure, which let me just jump into the levels. This one I haven't showed you. It's similar to curves in the sense that you can adjust the red, green, blue individually or the RGB of the overall image. You see the histogram where it has lots of highlights. That's this entire sky. That's why there's this big peak over here on the right-hand side. And then there are some of the parts down here that are a bit darker. Now, taking these points at the bottom and dragging them to the left or right will adjust the exposure. Taking the midpoint, for example, dragging to the right will make things a little bit darker. Taking this part of the sky, which I might want to drag this part of the sky to the right a little bit, helps because it brings back some of that information in the sky. Dragging the mid to the right makes everything darker, but I want to drag the darks back a little bit to make those a little bit brighter. Turn it off, on, and I think that looks a little bit better actually. I think before, for me anyways, it was a little bit too contrasty and we didn't have that information in the sky. All right, with landscapes, definition is another thing that you might want to play with. It's just a slider that makes things a little bit sharper, edges a little bit more clear. And so for a wide landscape, you might want to add a little bit. So turn it off, then on, off. It's kind of hard for you to see. Let me crank it up so you can see what's happening. On, off, on. So with it cranked up too much, it looks a little bit too contrasty and too much noise and grain in there. So I'm just going to add a little bit of definition. Let's play with the colors. So let's go up to the colors And for landscape, this can be really fun. I'm going to increase the saturation quite a bit so that we have some of that contrast and color in the sky. For the cast, let's see what this is going to do. Remember, the cast is if you're shooting in the shade or with some bluer light, you want to make it warmer or cooler. If we want to go for that sort of cool style, we can drag it there, but I kind of like the warmness of the sky up there. So that's kind of cool. Saturation I might bring down just a little bit though, so it's not looking unnatural. You can tell if you've been following me that I actually don't like things to look unnatural in my photos. That's kind of the way that I edit. Let's go into our selective colors and let's just pick a specific color in the sky. So using our color dropper, I'm going to pick this red or this pink, and I'm going to increase the saturation of there to try to make our sky pop a little bit more. This is becoming a little bit more surreal, which I actually don't mind for this photo. And some things that you might want to do is if I bring this up, that starts to look a little bit wacky, but we can bring the overall saturation down to bring down everything, but still the orange and the pink of the sky will be sort of more saturated because of that selective color adjustment, which might look good. And of course, you could have started there without bringing up the saturation, but this is just my process. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. I like to just check my work by seeing before, after, before, after. I'm loving the colors we're seeing. I'm loving what we're seeing in the sky. White balance, I think, is fine. If we want sort of to make everything a little bit warmer, we can. If we want to make it cooler, we can. But I'm just going to click that, get rid of it because I liked how it was originally. With a vignette, I'm not going to add a vignette. Adding a vignette to a landscape, for me, it looks completely artificial. Yes, some lenses actually have a natural vignette to it, but I don't like adding sort of a vignette, especially with skies. That looks really unnatural to me, so I'm going to turn that off. The only thing I might go in and do is a little bit of noise reduction. This is the photo we used when learning about noise reduction. So I might go in here just a little bit. And this is kind of combating what I did with the definition, which is adding a bit of noise to make things a little bit sharper. But because this was shot at the beginning of the day, let me see what settings we were using. We had an ISO 1600, which isn't too high for this camera, but it does add a little bit of noise. So I'm going to see what that looks like before, after. It's just subtle, but it cleans it up just a little bit, and I like that. The last thing I'm going to do is just go into curves to see if I want to add a little contrast or maybe not. I'm going to actually click the curve for RGB and bring everything up a bit, which brings the overall exposure of everything up. After looking at this for so long, I feel like it's a little bit too dark, but maybe I can go into the top and bring down the highlights so that we still have that information in the sky. This is making it less contrasty. It's kind of the opposite of the S-curve that we've created in the past to add contrast, but it's bringing up the darks, making everything a little bit more flat, but also a little bit better exposed overall. Cool. I'm really liking this. Now let's go and just see the before and after. Before, after, before, after. Lots more colors, definitely a little bit more artistic and creative, not as natural as some people might think or want, but if you see this for the first time, it actually might look pretty good. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click done. I am going to save this image. I'm going to share it on social media because I'm happy with this image. And hopefully you enjoyed walking through my entire process of editing this landscape photo in Mac Photos. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in another lesson.